One joke from Colin Jost did what years of royal drama never could.
President Trump also announced a new trade deal with the UK that will reopen British markets for American companies. All that Britain demands in return is that we keep these two.
More dangerous than anybody there. She's just underrated and plays a dumb ginger card. I don't know what I'm doing. But Fergie, you better watch out for Fergie.
It exposed the cracks. Meghan couldn't hide.
Finally, Auntie confirms big bombshells that we all kind of knew. Meghan yachting ways, Meghan's client.
If Meghan thought the trade deal jab was the worst of it, she seriously underestimated how far Colin Jost was willing to go. The moment he realised the audience wasn't walking out, he leaned in harder, like a man who'd been waiting years for this exact moment to strike. His delivery slowed, sharpened, and lost the typical SNL silliness. This wasn't the goofy weekend skit. It was the kind of controlled, knife-edge humour comedians unleash when they know they've crossed into dangerous territory and have no intention of turning back.
Jeffrey Epstein, we know that he was a very, very clever man, and he didn't like to show himself a lot. In fact, there are very far and few pictures taken of him.
Then he hit Harry's infamous line from Spare, the one about mistaking the Queen's aide for a servant. Jost didn't have to pile on. He let the absurdity sit and marinate before delivering the next strike with surgical precision. The crowd didn't know whether to laugh or cringe, and that was the brilliance of it. The discomfort worked entirely in his favour. You could tell he wasn't mocking Harry as much as dismantling the delusion surrounding the entire Sussex brand, the curated victimhood, the dramatic revelations, the desperate, sometimes theatrical attempts to stay relevant through selective storytelling.
For a reason. You see a lot of pictures of people. He used to take pictures of people in his yacht, but he didn't get any pictures of himself. It was always getting pictures of other people.
It was comedy, yes, but also a public, unrelenting stripping away of the fantasy Meghan had carefully constructed. Meghan had been selling that fantasy for years, and then came the line that made even veteran SNL viewers sit up straight, the one about children not knowing who their daddy was. Brutal, brazen, and perfectly placed to guarantee shockwaves. This wasn't just a joke. It was a statement. America had officially stopped treating Meghan with kid gloves, and SNL was leading the charge. What Meghan didn't realise, or maybe refused to accept, was how quickly a single televised joke could reopen a vault she thought had been sealed years ago.
Extreme links between Meghan and Epstein. And there's a particular girl that Meghan Markle was on a yacht with. That was one of the...
The moment Colin's segment hit social media, the tone online shifted. Humour didn't stay humour, it became ammunition. People didn't just laugh, they remembered. And what they remembered most were the whispers. Meghan had spent her adult life dodging the yacht stories. These weren't new, they weren't fresh. They'd floated around Hollywood for years, dismissed by some, believed by many, and ignored by Meghan completely.
Compromising situations, and once they were there, that's how he got around. This is the kind of individual this man was. That's how he got around. So many have said to knowing him and borrowing him money. And yet, try hard as I might, I haven't been able to find a public, listen to what I'm saying, a public.
But they were dangerous because they lived in that grey area where denial feels performative and confirmation seems impossible. SNL didn't mention yachts. It didn't have to. The internet connected dots faster than any PR team could scrub them. The jokes about Meghan's image, her ambition, her calculated rise. They acted like keys unlocking every old thread, every gossip blog, every archived forum where people had once whispered about those Mediterranean summers and the ultra-rich men allegedly funding them.
Of Jeffrey and Sarah, in spite of the fact that I am sure they have taken pictures with themselves all along. There's very few. Because these people know how to cover their tracks. Make no mistake.
Suddenly, hashtags Meghan hoped were dead started reappearing. Screenshots of old blind items resurfaced. Former Hollywood assistants, extras, and background actors began chiming in. I always heard stories. I wasn't surprised. This wasn't about truth. It was about possibility. And online, possibility is the deadliest currency. Meghan knew the pattern. She'd watched other women's reputations collapse under far less. And for the first time, She realized her past wasn't staying politely hidden anymore. The real chaos kicked off 48 hours after the SNL joke. The internet suddenly exploded with a new wave of vintage yacht photos. No one claimed responsibility. No major outlet reported them. They simply appeared, dropped into the algorithm like grenades. Sunlit decks, oversized hats, designer sunglasses, bodies posed purely for the male gaze. At the center, a woman whose resemblance to Meghan was close enough to ignite a wildfire. Real? Fake? Meghan? A lookalike? The internet didn't care. What mattered wasn't accuracy, it was the aesthetic. The contrast between these photos and the Duchess Meghan had spent years portraying, the TED-style empowerment speaker, was jarring. Suddenly, the public saw her compared to a woman lounging on a billionaire's yacht with a glass of champagne and a perfect, camera-ready smile. Then old quotes resurfaced, including Virginia Roberts suggesting Meghan could serve as a witness due to alleged proximity to certain powerful circles. The situation went from spicy to fully radioactive. For Meghan, this wasn't just rumour territory anymore. This was shut down your PR calendar, close your blinds, hope your lawyers are awake territory. Her team didn't issue statements. They didn't deny anything. They went silent. Not strategic silence, but stunned silence. The kind that shows even they didn't know how to get ahead. Because whether the woman in the photos was Meghan didn't matter. The internet had already made up its mind. Once the photos hit the algorithm, the internet did what it always does. It became a forensic lab run by people with too much time, too much curiosity, and zero fear of defamation. Reddit threads popped up in hours, each filled with armchair investigators dissecting every piece of jewelry, every angle of sunlight, every grainy background detail. Some users matched hats, others matched wrist sizes, and a few went full-on detective mode with side-by-side comparisons. One user even created a jawline comparison chart with the dedication of a forensic anthropologist, while TikTok stitched theories into layered narratives, and those narratives became entire self-contained timelines. YouTube commentators dropped 20-minute breakdowns connecting yachts to Hollywood parties, elite social circles, and high-profile names. No PR team wants trending next to their client. Traditional media stayed silent, not protecting Meghan, but because yachts and unnamed socialites make legal departments sweat bullets. Online creators don't have legal teams, they have followers, and followers reward audacity. Silence from mainstream outlets didn't calm the chaos, it amplified it. People assumed cover-up. Meghan wasn't just running from rumours, she was running from a narrative far bigger than herself. By the end of the week, Meghan's carefully curated, empowered Duchess image had been replaced with a new, algorithmic version, painting her as a woman with a past far more complicated than she had ever acknowledged. And the scariest part, she realised she could no longer control the story. The internet had taken over, and it wasn't letting go. The shift didn't happen in one single moment. It crept in slowly, like fog rolling over a coastline, soft at first so most people barely noticed. But once the internet turned its full attention on Meghan, the cracks in her public image became impossible to ignore. For years, she'd managed to fuse Hollywood glam with Duchess-level gravitas, creating a persona polished enough to shine and flexible enough to market. But when the rumours began spreading at high speed, people didn't just argue about the truth, they began scrutinising her. Every glossy charity photo suddenly looked staged. Every podcast segment felt overheard. Every documentary confession seemed like a performance designed for sympathy, not sincerity. The camera angles, the lighting, the emotional crescendos, all the little details she once relied on to build her image now looked like evidence of overproduction and meticulous orchestration, leaving the audience suspicious of every gesture. Commentators started using a term that sent shivers through PR departments: the illusion collapse. It wasn't just cruel, it was painfully accurate. When you sell authenticity as your brand, the moment people doubt your transparency, everything else crumbles with it. Fans who once defended her turned hesitant. Critics previously dismissed as haters suddenly sounded reasonable. Analysts began pulling up archived videos, comparing patterns, highlighting contradictions. The internet became an open-source investigation into her persona, not just her actions. Every detail she once controlled now felt like public property, open for debate and dissection. Meghan's entire rebrand, the polished humanitarian, the enlightened feminist, the sophisticated duchess, started looking less like evolution and more like strategy. And when the audience senses strategy, the magic breaks. That was the beginning of her real nightmare. Behind Montecito's massive gates, the atmosphere shifted from calm elegance to controlled chaos. Sources described a mood that felt less like a celebrity household and more like a crisis command center. Staff whispered, phones buzzed constantly, and meetings stretched into tense marathons where no decision felt safe. Meghan, usually the driving force behind every project, reportedly withdrew almost overnight. No more Zoom appearances, no voice memos for her team, no carefully staged outings for the paparazzi to accidentally stumble upon. She vanished inward, leaving a vacuum her staff scrambled to fill. Her PR team spun in circles, drafting statements they never released, preparing strategies they never executed, holding meetings that spiraled into arguments over timing, tone, and the tiniest detail of public perception. Every hour brought another wave of online chatter, another rumour gaining momentum, another theory her silence only strengthened. Harry tried to keep the household functioning. Morning runs, school drop-offs, a few visits with friends, but people close to him noticed the strain. His jokes were shorter, his patience thinner. He carried himself like someone who knew a storm was coming but didn't know where it would hit first. Meanwhile, whispers spread among staff and assistants who were usually unbothered. They exchanged nervous looks. Publicists argued over whether to speak or stay silent. Lawyers hovered like storm clouds. Someone allegedly muttered a line that became the mansion's unofficial truth. They thought silence was strength. Now, it was starting to look like surrender. Montecito wasn't just quiet. It was tense. Every minute of inaction felt like losing another piece of the narrative, and Meghan knew it. By this point, the problem had grown beyond jokes, headlines, or resurfaced images. It had morphed into something far more dangerous, a question of identity. The internet wasn't debating what Meghan did or didn't do. It was debating who she really was, and that is the kind of narrative shift celebrities rarely recover from. For years, Meghan's success had stemmed from her ability to reinvent herself. She moved from cable actress to royal figure, from royal exile to global philanthropist, from Hollywood hopeful to multi-million-dollar brand. Reinvention was her currency, but reinvention only works when the audience believes in the transformation. Now, people weren't buying the new character, they were dissecting it. Every old interview resurfaced with comments analysing micro-expressions. Every charitable act was questioned for motive. Every public appearance became a point of comparison, how she stood then versus now, what she said then versus contradictions today. In modern culture, perception isn't just part of a public figure, it creates the public figure. People don't follow royalty anymore, they follow narratives. And when Meghan's narrative started to feel manufactured instead of genuine, the illusion that protected her began to crumble. She wasn't being judged as a duchess or an actress anymore. She was being judged as a brand, and the brand's trust was slipping fast, right through her fingers. Once that happens, even the truth struggles to survive. For years, Meghan believed she had reclaimed control, from Hollywood, from the palace, from the media. She curated her image through documentaries, interviews, photo shoots, and branded content. She and Harry built a narrative machine designed to dictate what the world saw, when it saw it, and how it interpreted it. But the internet doesn't obey palace rules or Hollywood strategies, and suddenly the control she fought for evaporated. The public wasn't asking what happened. They were deciding what happened, and worse, they were deciding what kind of woman they believed she was. Meghan wasn't just losing control of the narrative, she was losing ownership of her identity. Millions of strangers were reconstructing her past, connecting dots she never acknowledged, telling a version of her story she couldn't rewrite or silence. That's the deepest kind of panic for a public figure, not scandal, but irrelevance. When people decide your image for you, your intentions stop mattering. Interviews couldn't fix it, documentaries couldn't reframe it. Carefully lit shots of her in a white button-down with a meaningful gaze couldn't soften it. Authenticity had become the one currency she could no longer convincingly sell. Her public persona, once powerful, eloquent, emotionally polished, now looked fragile, almost artificial. The more she tried to stay quiet, the more people filled in the silence with assumptions, and there was no recovery plan for an identity collapse. Not when the crowd feels it knows the real you better than you do. Just as Meghan's digital world burned in California, a very different kind of fire ignited across the Atlantic, a storm that had nothing to do with jokes or rumours and everything to do with palace pressure, buried secrets, and a decision that could shift the entire Sussex narrative. Rumours leaked from London. A senior royal had boarded a flight under unusual circumstances. Not a planned appearance, not a scheduled engagement, something sudden, discreet, and unsettling. Royal watchers speculated about Andrew. Others whispered about internal investigations. A few pointed to sealed documents tied to elite circles. Meghan would rather never be mentioned again. And the timing couldn't have been worse. Behind palace doors, moves were being made that looked less like protocol and more like preparation for what nobody could say publicly. Insiders claimed it involved resurfacing records, old witness lists, and names once quietly shielded from the press. Meghan's name, according to several online discussions, hovered dangerously close to conversations she had prayed would never reopen. Her nightmare wasn't the SNL mockery. It wasn't the yacht photos. It wasn't even the internet. Dismantling her image, her nightmare was this. When the palace and the public turn their attention to the same question, who is she really? There's nowhere left to hide. You can survive gossip. You can survive scandal. But you can't survive when the world stops believing the story you're selling. This chapter wasn't the end. It was a warning. If you're following this shocking unraveling, make sure to like, subscribe, share, and drop your thoughts in the comments. The story isn't over, and the next twists could blow the roof off.